Guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, "Neighbor Trespassed on my private property and cut my hedge without permission. He's insane. I have had several issues with my next door neighbor, Wendy, regarding where the property line actually splits between our two yards. Anytime we try to do something to our backyard, or wheel in our trash cans on the side of the house, she tries to tell us that we are in her property and keep your crap on your yard. The issue was, however, that we were wanting to redo our backyard layout and put some serious yard work in. I did not want to hear anything from Wendy, so my husband and I actually got professional land surveyors to come out, so we could officially start on our renovation plans. I was actually surprised that this worked out in our favor, and it turns out that a portion of the property line actually belonged to us rather than her. It was a small section along the property line towards the back of our yards, but regardless, I was not going to complain. Actually, I kind of just wanted to shove that in her face. But I do not enjoy confrontation, especially with her. So, I just minded my own business and we continued planning out our backyard renovation. Before we started any actual projects in the backyard, we made sure that we had everything planned out first. We wanted to make sure we had everything ready before we started, so that way it would be more efficient and faster to get it done. In our plans, we had planned out having a new garden bed on the side of the yard. We wanted to put it on the side closer to Wendy, so we made sure that we were not going to put it super close to the property line. We had left the metal pins and stakes the land surveyors had used, because we did not want her to say that anything we were doing was on her property line. I figured we could take them out in a couple of weeks anyways, after the tension over the property line subsided. Turns out it would never subside. We had started our official renovations and remodeling about 2 weeks after the land surveyors left, and if our neighbor was not complaining about the property line issue still, she was complaining about something else. One day, she came over to complain about all the noise the workers were making. While it was pretty noisy, it did not seem like it was too noisy when we were inside our house, so I could not imagine that it was worse for our next door neighbor. We ended up with a beautiful new outdoor patio, with special stones and tiles. And not too far from the patio was the garden beds for which we had planned. They were filled with beautiful, colorful roses and flowers, and had hedge bushes to create a sense of our own space within the backyard. There were not really fences in the neighborhood. The hedges stuck out of the garden beds slightly, and while they were near the property line, they were nowhere near over the line or on Wendy's yard. As a matter of fact, they were actually about 2 feet away from the metal stakes that marked the boundary line. And yes, we did actually measure it. Well, it only took about a day for Wendy to complain about the hedge bushes. She first stated that they were too close to the property line, and I kindly let her know that while they were near the property line, they were still 2 feet away from the actual line. I was not going to change my backyard up again, as long as we were following the rules, which we were. After I let her know that we would not be changing anything about the backyard because everything fell within rules and guidelines, she started complaining about the aesthetics of the hedge bushes. I also kindly let her know that what we did with our backyard and house was none of her business, or anyone's business, and it did not matter if she did not find it aesthetically pleasing because it was not her house. I was tired of dealing with her at this point and I honestly did not know how she could keep complaining about stuff that did not matter. She had no shame. Well, she was not done yet. Just 2 days later, in the early hours of the morning around 7 a.m., we heard a chainsaw in our backyard. Upon further investigation, Wendy was in our backyard, without our permission, obviously, cutting our hedge bushes in half with a chainsaw. I was so pissed off, so I immediately called the police officers. It may not have been an emergency situation or appropriate to call 911, but she was in my backyard with a chainsaw. She had no right to do this, nor did she have permission to enter my backyard. Although it may have been an overreach in calling the police, it ended up working out in my favor, surprisingly. I explained everything that had happened up until this situation. I even showed them the metal stakes left in the ground from the land surveyors. With all the information I gave them, a police report was created, and Wendy was actually taken to court. I was not sure what I was expecting, but I honestly was not expecting for Wendy to get the karma she deserved. After several court dates, Wendy was sentenced to 7 months in jail for trespassing since she did not have permission to enter our backyard. She was also ordered to pay us $1,000 for property damage and had to pay another $200 in surcharges. I bet Wendy learned her lesson this time. I was just excited I didn't have to hear her complain about the property line or other dumb things for at least 7 months. Although, hopefully by the time she is out of jail, she will not have anything else to complain about, haha. The next story is entitled Renter Wants Me to Pay His Landlord for Damage I Didn't Cause. My family and I live in a large building that houses several storefronts on the ground level and apartments on the second level. We own both levels of our portion of the building and have no relationship or communication with the other landlords. We live on the edge of what's considered the bad part of town, and the apartments around us are a revolving door of low-income renters who tend to treat the neighborhood and the people in it like shit. There's a fair amount of drug use in our neighborhood, too. The drug use itself really doesn't bother me. People can do what they want to do, but drug users aren't known for taking good care of their rental units. The landlord next to us rented her upstairs apartment out to some guy and his girlfriend who liked to have parties at all hours and blast hard bass so loud that the whole block sounded like a Russian rave. On at least one occasion my wife saw him and his guests climbing onto the roof so they could shout at traffic on the busy street below us. Really stellar people, you know? The way the building is put together, the entitled neighbor's apartment has a rear walkout that overlooks my fenced-in backyard. At the time, we also ran a business on the ground level of our building that had our telephone number printed on the window. This is important to the story because the backyard is where I let my indoor cats play during the day when we're at home, and the front window is how entitled renter got my phone number. So, one day I get a knock on the door. Entitled renter is furious because he says that my cat is constantly escaping my yard and climbing up into the soffit, fascia above his back door on the rear walkout that overlooks my yard. It's no surprise that he knows I have cats and he knows what they look like because he can see them in my yard when he's coming and going. Then he says that his landlord is charging him $500 to pay for the repair, and since it's my cat that did the damage, I have to pay him for the cost of the repair. I really didn't believe my cat was doing this damage. I'm sorry to hear you're having this trouble, but I really don't think my cat did this to your building. Well, he flipped his lid and started screaming and shouting. I finally told him, "Pix, or it didn't happen." He rages quit the conversation and went away. Later that same day, a police officer shows up at my door. Apparently, entitled renter thought he could file a complaint and get the police officer's help to mediate a solution. The police officer took a picture of my cat, and the entitled renter looked at the picture and swore that's the animal that was causing the damage, but he knows what my cats look like because he can see them from his yard. The police officer says that he really thinks the damage is being caused by raccoons, which is a likely explanation, but I also suspect that he damaged the soffit, fascia while climbing onto the roof while high. Nothing could be done, so the officer left. At any rate, this should be covered by his security deposit, and why isn't his landlord the one talking to me instead of him? The next day I started getting crank calls from anonymous numbers. One guy claimed he saw me hit his car in a parking lot, and another guy said he's been stealing our mail. I laughed at all those callers and told them to get lost. Entitled renter comes back a few days after that and says that my cat is tearing up the soffit, fascia of his apartment at all hours, and if I don't pay then he's going to put out traps, catch my cat, and then take it to the pound to be euthanized. I said that it's his property so he can do whatever he wants, but at this point I'm dead tired of his bullshit. I told him that my phone number is on the front window, and I want him to call me at any hour of the day no matter what time it is the very next time he sees or hears my cat damaging his apartment. He huffs off and I look forward to the next phone call. Fast forward a few days, and the whole family is going to a barbecue party at a friend's house. We brought the cats inside, locked the house, and left around 3:45 to help with setup, and we came back home around 10 p.m. after a long day of food and drinks. We never let our cats out at night, so that means they were inside from 3 p.m. and were still inside the next morning. I get a phone call from entitled renter who says that my cat was at it again last night. Oh, I'm really sorry to hear about that. When did it happen? Entitled renter says that my cat was up there last night at 9 p.m. To which I responded, well, my whole family went to a barbecue yesterday, so my cats were locked inside from 3:30 and they haven't been back out since, and now that I've caught you in a lie, I think you can stop coming after me for this money. To entitled renter's credit, he never bothered me again after that. The next story is titled, Problem Neighbor Feeding Feral Pigeons. Stink bombs. A tough response, but it worked. I live in a 10-story apartment building in a dense part of a city with numerous other tall complexes, but also a number of old single-family homes. One such home abuts my building, directly under my 8th floor apt. The longtime owner has had a pigeon co-op in his backyard for years. The birds smell and are a nuisance, but no big deal. Then about 6 months ago, the owner took it upon himself to dump 20 pounds of bird seeds in his backyard daily, attracting 200 to 250 city pigeons. They are ferals that lived in a nearby park, but once the feeding started, they ended up hanging out my neighbor's roof most of the day. Every day, complaints to him to desist were fruitless. Numerous neighbors also complained to city officials, but they were useless. Animal rights activists on our city council who halted a pigeon control program a few years back as cruelty to animals are very pro-animal. They refused to take action under the pretext that there is no sort of nuisance law the city could use in this case. The smell from pigeon shit in his yard progressively got worse, and the birds started roosting on our property and crapping on parked cars. Several disgruntled neighbors, including me, pondered a solution for months. A neighbor and I arrived at a solution, artificially escalating the nuisance level of the problem, specifically the bird reek, so the city can no longer ignore the nuisance. It had to be logical, secretive and calibrated. Someone couldn't throw dog poop onto his property and expect an outcome. Long story short, we concocted an odorous slurry. Using my 8th floor balcony directly over the pigeon lover's backyard, I gave it a gradually increasing midnight sprinkling of slurry, which disappeared into the grass in his messy backyard. Within 1 week, the increased odor emanating from his property reached half-block away. Suddenly the problem was resolved. We did not see the official action, but word was that several prominent businessmen who own a restaurant down the street complained to the mayor about the stench. The city took action. The guy is now only allowed to keep about 15 pigeons in coops, no more feeding the ferals. An unorthodox solution to a problem that needed to be dealt with. The last story is titled, Dishonest Neighbor Finds Himself Unable to Sell His House. This isn't my pro-revenge but my father's who escalated his petty revenge to all-out professional. Years ago, my neighbor was trying to sell his house during the fall, and he was selling it for incredibly more than it was worth, almost 6 figures higher. To make the property seem worth that figure, he would wake up early in the morning and take a leaf blower and blow the leaves past his front lawn into our backyard, and then some, making it seem like his front yard went all the way to our driveway and also included our beautiful tree older than all the homes in the area combined. We never had a backyard fence because his kids were my age, and we'd all play on the swing attached to that tree together. We were all cool. My dad wasn't too keen on this because he didn't want to get in a property dispute with the new owner, so he found the official property lines, and guess what? His front lawn ended about 3 feet from his house. So, my dad bought some little stakes with orange ribbon and hammered them into the ground to show where the actual property line was. Next day they were gone, thrown into the woods that surround us. My dad fetched them, nailed them back in and knocked on the door asking him to cut the crap. Next day gone once again with a passive-aggressive note on our door. My dad is a rather intimidating guy when frustrated, and he was apparently too scared to be confrontational, saying we need to just be cool with it and let him do his scam so he can sell the house. My dad then decided to up the ante and went to a hardware store and bought 4 12-foot iron rods, took out his ladder, and used the backside of an axe to nail it about 8 to 9 feet into the ground, and then watered the grass or did something so it couldn't just be yanked right out. So now there were just 4 ugly rods poking out of the lawn with bright orange ribbon tied to the top. My family goes away for a weekend, came back Monday, and all 4 are gone, tossed into the woods, and our backyard in those 4 spots are trashed with little holes from when he spent hopefully a long time digging those bad bois up. Obviously, my dad was furious, and he just silently stood there for about 20 minutes with a burning rage deep inside, and our entire family could him scheming. He turned around, hopped back in the car and disappeared for hours, only to return with a tow truck coming behind him. He popped over to a junkyard, found essentially a frame of a car and bought it for its worth in metal, and then had it shipped to his backyard, which he plopped just before the property line. My dad walked into our house like a great conqueror, saying let's see him throw that into the woods. The neighbor showed up later that afternoon, followed by prospective buyers who just stood in his driveway gawking at the junker 4 feet from the house. He tried to brush it off, and as soon as they left, He came over just yelling about how he was going to call the cops on us and home association for depreciating the value of his property, to which my dad said sure, go ahead, and I'll let them know about what you've been pulling for the past few weeks. Eventually they came to the agreement that the junker would leave the yard if he paid to have it removed and shipped away, and ever since then he stopped messing with the yard and stopped messing with the leaves. Thanks for listening.